Hello everyone and welcome to the Owlbear Inn, where we play TTRPGs and have a hoot. Now you're probably wondering why it's just me, Murray, here at the table instead of everyone else as well. That's because I'm on holiday and this is a recording. Or is it me from the future? TBD on that. But I'm here to give you a nice lovely little recap on how the Tales of Andrea has been going so far, but I figured I might as well start with a little bit more of a lore aspect on the background of the world itself, as it is homebrewed and can't be found in any of the D&D modules that you'll typically find on the shelves. This world is called Nathriel. It's been something that's brewing in my mind for quite a while. Where we started was in Quela, a lovely little continent of a bunch of different nations that have been unified through a, let's say, catastrophe of sorts. Basically, one of the races went a little crazy, decided to try to kill all the rest of them and take over the continent, and then the Magus, another homebrewed race, came in, unified the races, and bumped them out. There's a lot more details to it, but that's a story for a different day. Where we are focusing currently is actually on the band of misfits, for lack of any other kind of term, because that is what they are, a bunch of misfits, who were hired by the king of the United Nations of Quela to go find the missing princess, his daughter. That's pretty much all they were told. They were offered big fat paychecks and they decided, yeah, sure, that's good enough, that's all we need. So they were all mustered and thrown into a boat and sailed across the seas, something that has been attempted before in the past but never accomplished, on a brand new boat from the Osirid merchants. Now, all that actually was pre-broadcast. Where we start with Tales of Andrea is our 5 party members arriving in the capital of Recloria Denira during a time of high season, where the continent itself is affected in a matter of time, so to speak. The days can be longer and they can be shorter. The sun might set early on one day, the sun might not. They don't fully understand entirely what's going on with it, because something they quickly figure out and learn is that this land doesn't actually know magic. It can be found in what they call artifacts, otherwise known as magical items, but the people themselves don't practice magic. They don't cast spells of any kind. It's all their sheer wit and innovation that keeps the nations going forward. Quickly, they learned of a great conflict that's been going on for nearly 500 years between the 2 primary nations of Andrea, Recloria and Lebon. Recloria, where they landed, was comprised of elves, gnomes, halflings, the whole standard caboodle of your races inside your typical D&D world, except for humans. Humans are all on the other side of the continent in the nation of Lebon, where they shun and don't really welcome other kinds of nations. All of that is due to a very long bad history that was later to be discovered, designed to an aspect to separate the humans from all the other races, for matters and meanings that are yet unknown. However, to get into the entire details as to why these two nations are separated this way and the humans are separate from all the others is another story for another day. We've got two of those now. This being the case, our party members didn't entirely fit in inside this continent, because they all represented races that weren't actually represented in Andrea. They're not here, simply put, actually. First off, you've got Yolondriel, our wonderful cleric who's from the land of Dagrafin, a being out of place, pulled from another plane and drawn into Quayla for some reason that he does not know yet. What he's been told is that he is the herald of a god. Whose god? Not his. But he will later find out that it is actually quite literally his god. He was created by the god. It's devastating spoilers, we'll get that later. He is an Asimar. And Asimars are not common. They're very, very uncommon, actually. And seeing as he was an Asimar of the human variant, a human-looking being inside a land where there are no humans, and is quite actually, in fact, hostile towards humans, might lead to some negative effects for a while. Then you've also got Prologue, our wonderful Loxodon. He doesn't have any tusks. The tusked ones can be found in the land of Iridai, not Quayla. He was very large and intimidating and scarred all over, and follows the creed of 3-2-1, which is very abrasive in mannerisms, but also can be gentle as long as you figure out why Prologue is angry at you and apologize for it. For once you have disobeyed the creed, you are no longer his friend and he will not actually consider you a person. If you have an unholy tattoo, he will remove it from your body. You know, that kind of behavior and situations, which would be fine in Quayla, but is entirely unacceptable inside Andrea because it's unknown. No one knows what his creed is. And then there is Zorai, the white tiefling. Now, tiefling act. Never intelligent like this. Or civilized, I should say.
That's debatable.
Hey!
He actually, when you say that, he bursts out laughing. He's like,
barely house trained is more the word I'd use.
You guys
I have full confidence. I have full confidence in Zarai out on the field. Not in the city.
Yeah,
but out in the field, yes.
Like I said, he's not house trained. That's why you fully trust him out in the field.
Exactly.
Now, tieflings in the world of Nathria are very uncommon. Having deals and contracts with demons or creatures that can cause the effect of becoming a tiefling or having a tiefling is unheard of, essentially. So to find a tiefling out there would definitely tell you that either their parents or they themselves found one of those rare beings. They're oftentimes very shunned in societies and unwelcome, because those awful beings don't typically bring good things, and that is a sign of bad nature. However, seeing as they're very uncommon, not very many people know the truth behind what makes a tiefling. At the point of the party members arriving in Andrea, there are only actually 2 tieflings on the entire continent. Zorai and one that they had yet to meet. Anubisai is also a big eyesore for the Reclorians, as she was a big walking, talking suit of armor.
And walk out, and as I walk out, I'm gonna be like, Anubisai, watch Zorai.
No.
And the only example they had of big walking, talking suits of armor were their competitors on the other side of the continent, who they had been at war with for almost 500 years. So she definitely brought a lot of attention. Anubisai was a human necromancer at one point. However, with a spell gone wrong, you might say, she found herself relocated from her meat sack of a body to a suit of armor of a body. Whether it was on purpose or by accident, she never told anyone. All we do know is that she considers herself the goddess of death. Lastly, there was Paraspedis, a magus, which is a homebrewed race of individuals who are purely tapped into magical energies. They can use their own life as magic. Paraspedis was particularly of the blood-cursed magus, where the magic that he cast could only heal and aid others. He could not use his own life essence to harm or cause spells that would harm individuals. He was tapped into healing energies. And he had very, very specific looks. Very long white hair, pale blue eyes, and no blackness inside the eyes, like you see where the iris goes and where the pupil is. That was all white. Inside the maguses who were not afflicted full-on with this blood curse, their eyes are all black. A very strong separation between the two, and definitely makes the magus who have this affliction pop out quite a bit more. With the party members having arrived, made a giant impact, and potentially starting a few problematic relationships, but also creating some good ones, they started to travel the lands and try to find their quarry, the princess. Everywhere they went, they caused chaos. The first place, they got kicked out for drunken disorderment. They released a masked murderer, Duncan the Brutal, and basically just left the town in a hectic mess. The next one, they killed a guard, and one of them was arrested and had to get broken out. They met a connection, though, Leaf, who was a drow from the Qualan continent, who had actually travelled to Andrea with the princess. So, they got their first lead. Yay! They then travelled into the deep forest where they encountered a being that they didn't understand. It ate and devoured souls. However, they destroyed it, made a pact with some harpies there. Anubisai convinced them that she was their god, moved right along and rescued Steve, who was the companion of Zorai and had gotten lost during their journeys. Or taken by the harpies, actually, but, 6 to 1, half a dozen the other, right? Eventually, they found themselves in the city called Yark, where they made a deal with the overseer, Lady Galani. All the negative feedback and negative news that they had received and built up inside the nation of Recloria had started to get them to be wanted people. In order for some positive clout, they made the deal with Lady Galani to go clear a mountain and fetch something that she'd been seeking.
It's a fun yark.
Yark. Following her was the first time that they found one of the trees. A deep, dark-rooted entity that was sentient to a degree, contained a curse that combined with Lady Galani, turning out to be the thing that she was after, and a gem in the center that sparkled like the starlight. Seeing that Lady Galani could potentially be a problem with whatever it was that she was gathering, the party decided to leave that for a later date, and not actually take care of it. Then they moved right along to the city of Nutra. Recently they had gained word that there was going to be a giant festival of all the nations combined in the city of Lithrom, where they might actually get a better chance of learning or following some more better potential leads. Along this journey they met a friend named Wisp, who turned out to be another individual who stowed away on the boat that sailed from Koala to Andrea. Wisp travelled with them for a while until he separated their presence as the party headed towards the city of Drumnar, into the lands of Lebon for the first time. They were still met with hostility and unwanted presence, as they represented different races, and only one of them looked anything similar to a human. It wasn't hostile in any way, but it was shunned. They were always met by guards at the gates or followed through with a patrol closely behind them. In the city of Drumnar, they were after the high priest Aldir, who had the Braces of Eshna, which was a piece of the set of armor that Yolondril was after. However, after having a conversation with him, and being told, no, you're not ready for this piece yet, you must gather others before coming here, they were told where some other pieces were. A prime aspect of them would have been the Belt of Eshnar, which rested on one of the very few Aarakocra left in Andrea. He was going to be at the Festival of Nations in Lithrom. So the party members decided, yay, let's go up there and have some fun for once. So they travelled to Lithrom, encountered a tattooist friend of theirs that they met in Yark, Carson, entered in the gates with him, and then separated and had some fun with some festival times. Together, they all partook inside a tournament where they had to behave as a team to overcome obstacles, fight different creatures, where they first were issued a name. At that point, they started to be known as the Foreigners. But here they started to actually get a bit more positive clout. They met Captain Sobre, a drow who had also travelled from Quaila on the boat that the princess was on, and then proceeded to take command of the boat after the previous captain of it, was found dead. I'd say they made a deal. It was more they grossly overhired her by paying her a crap ton of money so they could set sail northward and start exploring some aspects about these trees that they had heard about and been encountering with Lady Galani.
Whatever we've gotten ourselves into, Sabre, we need a raise.
Something about it didn't sit right with them, and they needed to look into it more. This was probably the first area where we start seeing them diverge off the path of looking for Princess Kostia, and hoping that evidence of her comes across as they travel through the seas or through the lands for these trees. These plans were interrupted. Having gotten such reputation, being part of a different nation, they were invited to speak to the leaders of Andrea, to introduce the aspect of Quaila to Andrea. These talks were interrupted by an unknown entity that began to attack the city from beneath. These hideous hordes of constructed flesh and earth burst from the ground, being led forth by several different generals, one of them being recognized as a being with the mark of the Magus on him, all over. Not just the one typical line that most Magus have, but covered by them. Dressed in red entirely, and followed by other strong individuals behind. The party members fled this scene. The foreigners found the boat that Sabre captained, set sail, and left destruction behind them. While the party members were traveling northwards towards the Shallows Estates, they encountered a small island with a peculiar hut on it that caught their attention. They decided to land on it and go into the hut, where they encountered a being named Adi Baba. With Adi Baba, they made a deal for another piece of Eshna. He hired them all to travel northwards towards an island called the City of Souls. At one point it did have a different name, however, through the time and the fact that it isn't filled with nothing but skeletons at this point, the people just call it the City of Souls. He wanted them to find a constituent of his, someone he had hired to discover what they could and find what they could from the place. However, he hadn't heard from them for a while, so he wanted them to look into it. He wanted the foreigners to do that, as their group name is now officially that. When they arrived, they found exactly what he described to them, nothing but death and decay. They also found a very dangerous being, some things that were referenced as dream demons. They never attacked whenever they were awake, they only attacked when they were asleep, in their dreams, where they could enter in and steal your soul for a small little snack. Unfortunately, while fighting the greatest of all these dream demons, Paraspedis. I always got it wrong during sessions, and now I'm still getting it wrong. Paraspedis did fall in combat, and he did die. However, with his death did come another birth of some kind, as they did discover another tree, this one without a corruption, sentient, and able to inform them what their purpose was. The gems inside were filled with the past souls of those who died around, a way of storing energy for use, either for nefarious means or friendly means. That is for the user of the gem. They gathered that gem and also said goodbye to Zorai, who elected to stay behind as the guardian of the tree and to keep an eye on and track their works. try to help find the other trees and find their new purpose, which is to hunt these trees down and purify them, thanks to one of the new party members, Aberrat, a being who was created by this tree. Aberrat, being a fungal druid of some kind, appears to have moss and mushrooms growing on him here and there, although as the time's gone by, it has lessened greatly, and he looks more humanoid and human than anything. Paraspedis' body in tow, they finished their journeys to the Shallows, having completed the deal with Alibaba and received their prize. When they arrived to the Shallows estates, they found Admiral Vuja, transported over Paraspedis' body to her so she could see about the rites of his funeral and his death, and encountered a few other beings. One of them, a satyr named Jartis. This peculiar little... Why don't you describe your character?
Hello. My name is Ben. My character is Jartis Clinwalk. He is a male satyr. He is of the druid persuasion. So, I guess this guy is of the Shallows estate. There's been...
This little entity had grown up in the Shallows estate, having been sold to them a very long time ago to fulfill a debt that his parents owed the states. He was very adept in making maps and getting into areas and hearing conversations that he potentially shouldn't hear. However, he was also gifted with magic, one of the very few entities and beings in Andrea who could. As such, he was a hot commodity for certain beings. Admiral Dania of the Shallows Estates had grown a little concerned for his well-being and his safety, and wanted the foreigners to take him in under their wing. This is when he officially joined the party. It's also when Fine Storm, the Black Tabaxi from Iridai, the lands up north, who had traveled here on his own mission that he still hasn't informed anyone of. Fine Storm, why don't you describe yourself?
They see that a tabaxi monk, panther style, or panther species, subspecies, pure black. The monk bindings and everything are also black. Eyes are blue. No other visible weapons or items being carried.
With the party back up to being full strength after receiving a death in the members, they were invited by Admiral Sabdras to come and have a discussion. Little known to them, an invitation like this is irrefutable. You cannot refuse it. You must adhere to it and see Sabdras. Prologue refused. As such, he was seen as guilty as disobeying the laws of the land, and must pay penance. They were sent with Admiral Bill of the Shallows estate in tow to see to them actually doing their penance to an island called the Living Forest, to figure out exactly why the trees were moving so much. With the party now on the way to the Living Forest, they actually ran into another island, a peculiar one, much like Adibaba's. This one had a giant mansion on the top of it, and was actually moving. They decided that it was worth their time to stop, check it out, and make a landing of sorts. They encountered a few resistances, but then made their way into the building. There they met one of the mission kings of Quela, Marcus, and his children, creations of his, beings of humanoid nature, but not quite human. They were created clones of his own kind and invention. At this point, he'd been missing for about 500 years, and is quite insane. There are many things that he did through the years to the Andrean people that many would consider quite unforgivable. Mathona actually managed to convince the party, however, that it was a result of bad happenstances due to some of the magics that he partook in the past. Without any barriers in place, he didn't know what was good to go into or what was bad, and he had no compulsion or unwillingness to put himself in the front line for the furtherment of magic. It was Marcus who had created all the trees, who had made them what they are, and gave them the ability to snatch up the souls. He was the one who was harvesting and creating these starlight crystals, the hearts of the trees, for his own means. Mathona believes that if enough of them were gathered, that they could restore his sanity. Convincing the party to break the contract with the king of Quela, she hired them to go around gathering these hearts. As a result, they did. They broke the contract. They pissed off the king of Quela, had him sail on an entire fleet over to Andrea to find his princess, his daughter, who, by the way, was with Mathona, because Princess Kostia, smart little person, found them all first and has been traveling with them and trying to help figure out the issue with her uncle. The tree in the living forest that was causing all the issues that they had one of these hearts. So, fulfilling the contract and fulfilling the penance at the same time, they continued on their way to the living forest, where they met Volus, who guided them through it and then gave Eulandriel a slight case of lycanthropy. You know, no biggie, he's a werewolf now.
This grog jog.
Yeah.
This is going to end badly.
The new members of the group will, whilst on the grog jog, attempt to steal small trinkets. And if they get caught, they lose and have to pay the person thrice what it was. Winner gets a prize I have not thought of yet.
This is the most surprising challenge I've ever seen.
Why is theft involved?
Because it is humorous.
For the lulz.
I mean, yes, it will be hilarious, but what if they have some sort of execution law?
The curse on the tree connected itself to Volus, who they managed to convince to keep sailing with Sabre. And the heart itself they gathered up, then brought back to Mathona and gave to her for their payment. They then joined the boat again to finish the penance and actually report back that it's been done. But before that, due to the lycanthropy and them having a connection in Eula, or Needle, who is one of the members of Alpha A that they met earlier on inside the campaign, they decided they might need a little help. So they contacted Eula, found out where they were, teleported themselves using magic that Mathona knows to their location to get a little guidance and figure out what's going on. There they learned that Eula was actually a past experiment of Marcus, having been a female at birth and then turned into male due to some genetic manipulation, tongue removed, all kinds of awful things. However, all of it was fixed by Callus. The tongue's back and she's back to being she again. Eula was following Lady Galani, who was after another tree. The consequences decided, by the way, they're the consequences now. They like to flip-flop their names. They decided to keep going with Eula and check into this as well. They met Barnaby, the giant bear, lovely lad, who helped them get to their general destination, but they discovered that they were too late. Lady Galani had been successful, acquired her piece of the curse, and freely gave them the heart. After that, with a little bit of a strange mind and set, debating on whether or not they should have taken care of Lady Galani at that point, or if they should just keep letting her go about her business, gathering the curses the way she is. Not knowing entirely what to do, they decided to go towards Collector's territory, the city of Rylan, where a tree they believed was nearby with another heart for them to take. They made a boat, they traveled along, Abrat died, was found by Averin, a collector that they met a while back, kind of upset Prologue a little bit, had to apologize for being abrasive, I guess. And Abarak came back to life because he's a mycelial fungal growth who can't die by normal means. Oh, took care of Duncan the Brutal. That's an important note. Definitely important, that. Problem that they re-released into the world caused another 72 people to die. Yep, they fixed it. Got paid a lot of money for that too. And met with Folia, the leader of Alpha A, and Emlar, Yolondriel's now revealed brother, about a potential idea of overthrowing the king, who at this point Prologue was fairly sure was a Huglopid, Prologue having hunted them when he was in Quaila for large amounts of money. He was a mercenary, that's how he made his money before all this started. But seeing as the king was a Huglopid, which do not exist in Andrea, that caught their attention quite a bit, so they started making plans for that. But first they needed to travel to the Shalos estate to finish up some business over there. Once at the Shalos estate, Admiral Lars revealed to them again that he was worried about Admiral Danya's dealings and workings. They decided to actually help him a little bit and separated to interview and talk to other admirals that were also of question. Fine Storm uncovered the truth of what was going on, that several of them had been replaced by changelings, beings of the unknown enemy that they had begun to face as of recent times. They decided to call an all-admiral meeting, where in that moment the enemy took advantage, activated a spell they've been preparing for some time, and froze the continent, or the island of Shalos itself, completely stopped it in all time. Everything else around functioned, but they themselves were frozen in that moment. When they woke 21 days later, Sabdras was pinned to the ground in the obsidian court with many blades through him. He'd been dead for quite some time. Left as a symbol or a sign of some kind, they are not entirely sure. With Nero's help, they stopped the explosion that was meant to cave in the entire hollowed out volcano mountain. Connected Nero finally with Mathona, introduced the fact that they all knew where Princess Kostia, his sister, was this entire time, and revealed all the details to him about what's been going on. He didn't question it though, he trusted them fully and realized that they were in over their heads, and this was the point where they included him on it. So it needed to happen that way. Now that 21 days had gone by though, the plan for the king was in action. They knew when and how they could do it. As a peace summit was coming up to question whether or not the two nations of Recloria and Laban should still be in peace, they believed that they needed to do this beforehand so that the new king could be crowned and put in place for those meetings. They listened to the call. The consequences followed Folia to the assault location, which was another tree on top of a mountain, King's Mountain. Only the king himself was allowed to go up there, so no one knew it was there. They laid a trap, and they killed the long-running king of Laban.
Alright, so I'm gonna cast Revivify on King. No, I'm just kidding. Well, obviously I'm gonna cast Revivify on Fine Storm, for sure.
And replaced him with King Tagorin, his former High General, who secretly was also constituting and planning this whole thing. Together they all finally travelled to Nutra again, where the peace summit was to take place. They figured that they could take care of a few details of their own while the peace summit was happening. They were only a call away from all their now allies. The Qualan forces that had been sent after Prologue's cancellation of the contract had arrived, travelled with the Reclorians, and planned to play third party. Having unified their own nations, they thought they could play a good part in it. King Shago, however, was not pleased with Prologue's behaviour. However, due to King Tagorin's quick actions and thinking, he was protected from being arrested of any kind. Not to mention Captain Durin of Nutra wouldn't dare think of letting King Shago take Prologue at all. Nutra is neutral ground. All contracts are forfeit if you are in that city. You're safe. The consequences, though, they moved on. They moved upwards while everything was happening. they went back towards the deep forest area of Recloria. The Chancellor told Eulondriel that in order for him to be forgiven for the murdering of one of the captains, one of the guards in Mardrim, he was to travel to Moonlight to apologize to the family and ask for forgiveness. So they went there, but beforehand they had a clandestine meeting with a few individuals that they had been running into throughout the entire continent. The truth behind Eshnar was revealed, that he was a false god who had ousted all the other gods and trapped them in the mortal plane. Now, the gods were asking Eulondriel for help. They had removed Eshnar's influence from him, planted their own, and made him their champion. And he agreed, mainly because he was really pissed off at Eshnar and wanted to kill him. He just needs to see Eshnar die. After that, they went to Moonlight, apologized, then traveled on upwards, looking to help out another ally of Jartis's, Aerolith. Averin's the turtle from the Collector's territory. Aerolith's a drow. Aerolith, who was the brother of Leaf, an old connection of theirs. Seeking to aid their ally in this, they travelled towards the Shrill Drungle, which is a small island just off of the northwestern coast of Recloria, or Andrea continent. They discovered a lost tribe of drow, who were just trying to find their way back to their destined territory, as they called it. However, they were being thrown out and pushed away from it by the Church of Pi, a very strong cult in the lands of Recloria, who've been nothing but a thorn in the Reclorian government's side for many years now. They didn't find anything but death there, though. The Church of Pi was diminished to mere small numbers in the 10s and 20s. The drow couldn't make their way through this giant being of death. It's not so giant, it's just really huge. So the consequences helped. They ran in, they charged in, and defeated it themselves. But before this, Eulondriel had a realization. Came to the thought that there might be someone inside their organization working against them. Told Mathona this. Mathona started doing their own research as they rested for 8 hours and prepared the right spells for the battle ahead. When they charged in, they planned well, and they won. They were on their way back to the drow to tell them of their success when they were interrupted by Ileana teleporting in next to them in a complete shattered state, bruised all over and nearly dying. Quick thinking, they got Ileana back on her feet where she reported that the mansion was under attack. They quickly teleported to the mansion, saved Callus, saved Kelkos, attempted to save Princess Kostia, only to learn that it was Kostia that Eulondriel had discovered. It was her who had been planning this entire time and working behind their backs. Eulondriel, you, as the image is getting replayed over and over and over again, you can see her in front and begin to break down, lose control. And then you realize that the image of Paraspedis is changing. It's shifting. With each play, it's one angle changed. Till eventually, at the end of it, it is looking at you, grinning, smiling with blackened eyes. Aren't you just magnificent? As you were then shunted and thrown out of her mind, but with one last little whisper. Princess Kostia's voice saying, "Help me." She had taken all of the gems, the starlight gems, and in an effort to get the last one that Prologue was carrying on his body, she staged a little last-minute coup with her constituent Jack. Tricked them and almost killed them multiple times, finally opting to save her strength and only take Prologue's bag of holding instead. Being utterly exhausted from all the combat and all the fighting that had happened, the consequences were in no state to move forward. So they opted to rest after discovering that Marcus had managed to defend himself, gather a few books, and gain his consciousness for just a moment, thanks to a piece of the curse that they brought back and learnt was actually his soul that he'd been splitting off and hiding away to stave off the madness. It was very soon after discovering what Marcus had done that they all received word that the Peace Summit was under attack. The same entities and beings that attacked Lethrom during the Games of Nations was now attacking the Peace Summit itself. Though they were more prepared for it this time, what they were not prepared for was the taking of the Goliath, a giant battleship that the Laban forces had been working on for some time, fit with a cannon capable of shooting miles away. The city was being bombarded, destroyed bit by bit. Very few were organized enough to actually start evacuating any of the civilians that were there. The kings, King Togorin, King Shago, Prince Nero, and Folio of Alpha A all departed to go and see what they could do about taking back the Goliath. Even with all this news, the consequences stayed where they were. They accepted the fact that they were in no state to fight back. Now all this is up to episode or session 64. Obviously that's not all the details. I don't have enough time to give you all the details. If you want every little nitty-gritty bit, you're going to have to go and watch every single one of them, unfortunately. However, if you want some clarification on any of the questions of what happened in this, I know it's probably a little jumbled all over the place and confusing in some places. Not everything is explained fully. By all means, join our Discord. There's a place called Tea Time Table Talk. Pop your questions inside there. Any of the DMs who you are asking this question to can go in, and they have the right to refuse to answer some of the questions, mainly because maybe those details haven't been revealed yet. However, if you want to just pop the question in there, we might answer it on there, or we might do another type of recap video like this, where we start actually answering those questions and going into more detail with them. But for now, this is what I can give you in a recap, and hopefully it gets you up to speed. I did leave 65 out, even though 65 is now up and running, mainly because that's a good place to start off with. It gives you an idea of where we left all of them off and where they're currently at. And hopefully we'll see you again for 66 when I get back from my lovely holiday. Or am I already back? We'll never know. Ooh.
Doesn't matter. I got a natty 1 for 2.
Oh, shit. No, you fucking biff. And instead you punched Jarvis in the face accidentally.
Me?
Just casually like that.
My apologies, Jartis. I was trying to catch...
I don't know. I got a little charm person up in here. I think we need an hour of peace.
Followed by a lifetime of war.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Oh,
And by
I guess I'll
lifetime,
just
I mean your
take it like
lifetime.
I will find a permanent marker and make
guess I'll
a
just take
tattoo
it
on
like
Jardis
I'll just take it
while
like
he's sleeping.
the pansy
And then
Jardis
point that out
always
to
is.
Prologue in the morning. Prologue, look.
The end may have closed for now. We hope you met a friend this go around. Tired and blurry you may be. We hope your minds are full from this revelry. May peace follow you out. May you return for more giggles